all of you on behalf of Geeta International Business School. It is our privilege to have with us our esteemed guest, Mr. Gaurav Bhatia, Prize WPO, for the establishment and skills development workshop on time management. Geeta International Business School was established in the year 2004. It is affiliated to Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University, Delhi, and is approved by All India Council for Technical Education, Ministry of HRD, Government of India for its management courses, and Bar Council of India for its law courses. The institute conducts program of MBA first and second shift, MBA International Business, BBA first and second shift, BBA LLB, and BA LLB. The institute is accredited as A grade by NAAC and assessed as category A plus by Joint Assessment Committee of Government of India and IP University. The institute has been rated grade A by Academic Audit Cell of IP University consequently for past 8 years and also been ranked number 2 by Times B Survey 2018, 19 and 21. Gift with its favor and blessings of its well-wishers have come a long way school as a school of excellence in the field of professional education. At GIFTS, the thrust is on overall personality development of students so they can face the challenges in their competitive professional life with a value-based approach. Apart from providing quality education, emphasis is on to develop leadership qualities and decision-making skills right from the beginning of their professional education. With this objective at GIFTS, we conduct various workshops for our students at a regular level. The theme for today's workshop is time management. Managing time to strike a balance between personal life and studies is a crucial for a student. For achieving their goals, they need to utilize time appropriately since time once gone is a loss forever. Though a noble intention is essential, but effective time management can only make it worthy enough of pursuing. Hence, one needs to vigorously make efforts to become proficient in time management for better personal and professional life. Setting specific or realistic time bound goals and learning time management skills, which includes setting priorities, using time management mechanisms, and being determined enough to stay on the desired course, can act as a catalyst for student success. These are the foundation on which careers are built and examples are set. Keeping above aspects in mind, this workshop is organized to lead students or futuristic professionals to improve their ability to manage and utilize time in a fruitful manner for individuals as well as organizational effectiveness. In order to achieve our objective of value addition in our students, we have an eminent speaker with us, Mr. Gaurav Bhatia. Current Mr. Bhatia is the Chief Business Officer of RISE WPU, an online campus for upskilling and reskilling professionals in the areas of science, technology, and management. He's an MBA from INSEE and has an engineering degree from the University of Bombay. In the past 20 years, Mr. Gaurav has worked across Asia, Europe, Middle East, and Central Africa in education and healthcare. So, we are honored to have you here with us. Without taking much of your time, may I request our speaker to enlighten our students with his words of wisdom.
Thanks a lot for the introduction and welcome one and all. I'll just take a couple of minutes for the essence of time management, and but before that, I'll talk about myself. I think you've had a chance to look at, hear about what I do. I am the CBO at Rise WPU. So Rise is an online startup. We started off earlier last year in January. And the idea was that a lot of students who essentially are looking for jobs despite their degrees are unable to find them, largely because they lack skills that the workplace requires. And so our program helps in bringing in those skills that industry is looking forward to. And so we offer programs in different domains: AI, machine learning, data science, fintech, so on and so forth. So that's a brief introduction on what Rise WPO does. Prior to which I was a CBO at Leverage Edu. I've also been the manager for strategy and business development for APAC for a company called Elsevier, which is into information services and publishing. I've been the head of pharma business for them in India. And as you heard, prior to this, I did my MBA from INSEAD and I did my engineering from University of Mumbai way back in 2002. So that's my background in a nutshell. Now, as far as, by the way, is everyone able to see my screen? Is my screen visible to one and all?
Yes,
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 sir.
yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Start off with, the essence of time management. Now, for all of us, we feel that's the problem that only modern professionals have, that we lack time. That's not really true. Time management, in essence, has been a problem that comes in and is recorded, from time immemorial. And if you look at, supposed to be one of the greatest philosophers of all time, the Stoic philosopher, he essentially wrote content on time management. 1,000 years back is as today that as it was 2000 years ago, and those tips are as valuable. So the problem that we're talking about, managing time, essentially is a problem that has existed forever, and human beings have always been grappling around this particular issue on how can they prioritize and do things that are important. Because if you realize, right, our life is too short. We often hear this story about somebody wanted to do something, didn't get enough time. There are a lot of people, for example, recently died in COVID, or we've had relatives who've lost their times in COVID. None of them eventually thought that they will. Everybody thought that they have enough time to complete whatever commitments they have to their families, to their workplace. But time, doesn't wait for anyone. If our time's up, it's up. And so it becomes extremely important that, even not only from a professional perspective, from a personal perspective also, that we really value the essence of time, and we do things that are important to that moment, right? Professionally, personally, sometimes it's important that you do things for your family, and there's a certain time for it. Sometimes it's important that you do certain things for your friends because there's time for it. It's important that you're able to make time for your workplace and projects at your workplace, right? So all those three elements are equally important. I would refrain from saying that the workplace becomes more important than what you do in your personal life, because only when you have a balanced life will you be happy, right? And time management essentially helps you in ensuring that you have a happier life and you're able to make the most of the time that you have, right? And so that's essentially how I'd like to start off with the introduction. Now, this is a problem that's existed for more than 2000 odd years, and Seneca had some rules for us to look at. Just a second. A second, please. I'm facing some technical issues here. Just 1 second. So Seneca basically said that, like, we have a short time to live, but we really do not know. And so, just 1 second.
Your screen is not visible.
I'll have to restart. Just give me a second. I'm going to restart my screen sharing again.
Mr. Gaurav, kindly unmute yourself. You have been muted.
Technical issue. I don't know what happened. Okay. Can you all hear me now?
Yeah, 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 I can hear you. I can hear you.
And I'm going to be sharing my screen. Sorry for the technical glitch. I think there was some issue. I dropped out
No
of the
problem.
meeting.
No problem. You continue.
Let me know when you can see my screen. Can everyone see my
Yeah,
screen now?
yeah, it's clear now. It's clear now.
Perfect. Please see my screen. I'll probably go back and correct it to the right time. So Seneca's tips on time management, right? So basically, what Seneca said was that it's not like we have less time to live. It's essentially the fact that we waste a lot of it. So life is long as you know how to use it. These were his words way back, you know, in sometime early 80. But essentially, there were six different tips he gave for time management, which is essentially even important today. Time is only short if you waste it. If you don't waste your time, you'll have ample time to do whatever you do. That's one. And so, it's easy to hear this, but how do you practically implement it? So he gave the first practical rule of implementation. He said, give yourself a win for a short-term goal, right? Reward yourself when you win a short-term goal. So your a long goal can be broken into different milestones. Let's call each milestone a goal. Whenever you fulfill a certain goal, give yourself an immediate reward for it. What does that do? The minute you give yourself an immediate reward and award for doing something good, you're motivated towards the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. So that's a practical viewpoint that came in from Seneca on how individuals like us, for example, can focus a little bit more around our short-term goals. A lot of people, the third goal that he spoke about was reminisce on your past. Now this I would go back and tell you is a lot of new age philosophers say focus on the future, focus on the future, the past is gone. But Seneca had a very different view of it. He said if you look back at your past, you're likely to find patterns on what's gone wrong. If you can learn from those patterns and reminisce in your past, you're less likely to make those mistakes. So what he recommended was if you reminisce in your past, then and you find corrective action, then you can probably do things better in the future and save time. So this was, an advice that is different from modern philosophers today who basically tell you that only focus on the present or focus on the future and think towards working towards it. But he had a different viewpoint here, which is also equally valid. The next thing he said is when you're planning a project, right? And he said identify avenues and reasons for what are going to be distractions towards it. So when we start any undertaking, if you can identify what are going to be possible distractions for you, you're very likely to avoid those reasons because you've thought through it earlier, right? If I know, for example, that something's going to come to me as a distraction, and I know that that's how I'm going to waste my time, and I've thought through it earlier, I'm less likely to indulge my time on it. So that was tip number 4. Tip number 5 was focus on doing rather than being busy, right? This is also a modern ailment. You talk to most people in a corporate workplace, you talk to people in academia, you go and ask them what they're doing, they'll tell you we are busy. But what's keeping you busy, right? And you would be, probably people are fixed with mundane meetings, as students as well, right? If your parents come and ask you for something or your friends come and ask you something, you'll say I'm busy, right? And maybe you can find the time for it. But what's happened is we've kind of taken this tagline of being busy as something that's good for us. No, it isn't. What is useful is what are we doing when we are busy? Are we really doing something that's going to add value to our plans, or are we just loitering and wasting time, right? So what Seneca said was if you can focus less on being busy and more on doing things, you're less likely to waste your time. And then the last point that came from his side was leverage your free time and resources in creating new memories. I think this is something that's equally applicable today. As we if you're working in a workplace or you're with family or with friends, it's equally important that you take time off to do something new, to visit a new place, to do things that you can go back, look back on, and say you've been able to, that memory added value to your life. I think that's by far, the most interesting advice he gave, because everything else that he spoke about was largely with regards to time management from a work perspective. But the last one also essentially told you that use your time to even create new memories. Time is short, life is short. Only when you value it, you'll be able to make the most of it. So those were Seneca's tips. Now I'll move on to some modern day approaches on how you can manage time. Now these are techniques that exist. Now we'll start off with Pareto. So how many of you have heard of Pareto? I'd like to hear from you. Have you heard of the 80-20 rule? Folks, I'd like to hear from you here before I take this further. I'm just pausing for a second.
Well, Gaurav, they are all going to say that first year student,
Okay,
they have yet to learn about the time management.
no problem. So I'll
So you
just
can
talk about
continue and tell
Pareto
them to
then.
explain all these things to them.
No problem. So I'll
Yeah.
focus on Pareto. And Pareto basically, he had a principle where he said that there's always the 80-20 rule in life. 20% things essentially are responsible for 80% of outcomes, and 80% of things that we do only lead to 20% of outcomes. And so basically, what he said is our day, if we go back and look at it, 80% of our time is spent in trivial tasks, and 20% of our time is spent in vital tasks. Now, this 20% of time over vital tasks leads to 80% of the results, and 80% of the time we expend on trivial tasks lead only 20% of outcomes. What this really means is if we know where we are spending our time and what is relevant to the results, we can get better outcomes. I think that's the primary principle of Pareto. And that's what I wanted to start off with, that let's identify what is going to lead to an outcome, right? And basically, to implement Pareto's inputs, you also have something that is called as a 2 by 2 time management metric. Notes for this moment, just hear me out for a minute. Once you've heard me out and you understand the principles, it'll be easy for you to take things forward. So the 2 by 2 time management matrix essentially tells you to prioritize your time into 4 buckets, right? It's extremely simple. Just hear me out. The first thing is what's important and what's urgent. That should be one bucket. So, for example, you have your exams coming up, right? And they are 1 month away. That's important and urgent. It's important that you study for your exams because your grades count, right? You have a project submission coming up and your grades are linked to the project submission. It's important and urgent. You have an interview coming up for, let's say, an internship that you're applying for, and that interview is in a week from today, and you have to prepare for that. That's important and urgent. Work that's very important and that's due in a short period of time falls in the first bucket, that is the Q1 bucket, right? The next bucket you focus on is things that are important for the long run, right? But not necessarily important for the short run. So, for example, you're in the first year, you'll be applying for jobs in the next year, but it's important that you start networking with with professionals in the workspace. It's important you spend some time in identifying what kind of job opportunities exist. It's important to start reading about the job opportunities and identifying what is it that you really need to know to get those opportunities. That comes up in Q2. It's important, but it's not immediate, right? It's something that you can take a time because you have some time before you get into the interview process. So that's important and not urgent, right? But then you come up to Q3, which is important and not urgent. Not important and urgent. Basically, what this means is phone calls, replying to emails, time tracking, things that distract you. They are, for example, sometimes urgent because you have to revert back to an email, but it's not necessarily important. So you prioritize that for the later half of the day when you're taking a break. That's when you kind of do the Q3, and the Q4 is where you waste your time. For example, folks play Candy Crush. I'm not saying it's good for you to take a break and whatever else. I'm not saying A is good or B isn't, but I'm just giving you examples of what would generally apply over here. Or mindless web browsing, social media scrolling, things that don't necessarily add any value, but we spend a lot of time on it. So those come up in the not important, not urgent bucket. Now, how you prioritize your time is essentially focus your day when you start your day. Look at building this matrix, seeing, all right, what are my tasks for the day? What fall in the important urgent bucket? What fall in the urgent but not important bucket? What fall in the important and not urgent bucket? And what fall in the not important, not urgent bucket? Once you've categorized these 4 buckets, it becomes easy for you to focus your time on the relevant bucket for that day. So Q1 is always something that's going to be, that's work that's breathing down your throat, right? You really want to close that. Q2 is equally important because you're building something for the long term, right? Q3 and Q4, you have to do some things, but in Q4, the lesser you spend your time on it, the more productive your day is going to be. So that's how you essentially plan your day. And this is a very important and simple way to look at it in terms of priorities. I'll move on to the next slide. So one simple rule that you've got, all right, and this is, basically Mark Twain also spoke about it. It is basically eat the frog. Now, the frog basically here is the most difficult task, right? When you start your day, and let's assume that you're working on the Q1 bucket, how do you kind of prioritize your Q1 bucket also? Take the most difficult task first and the most important one and do that first. Because what that does is it takes, the most difficult piece out. Once you're done with that difficult piece, everything else becomes a cakewalk. What do? We do exactly the inverse. We procrastinate, like, this is too difficult, we'll do it later, we'll do it later, we'll do it later. And then eventually what happens is, uh, the most important task that we've got is left out completely. So eating the frog, all right, as something that I'll advise everyone to do. It's something that I also learned, later in my, in my career as an engineer, and as a student 20-25 years back. Not too much has changed, by the way. We're all used to last minute studying, right? We have exams, we pick up the books a month before the exam, and that's when we start studying, right? So that kind of becomes the characteristic of most students. But when you get into the workplace, it doesn't help you too much, because then you're always left scrambling for time. You're always left, fighting for, doing things, and you don't want, your growth kind of depends on how dependable you are, right? So if I am looking today after, almost 2 decades in the workplace, I can tell you that people who have done well in their careers are people who have performed consistently. Not once, they are consistent. They may not be the best at all times, but they're consistent at all times. And to do that, the one skill that, kind of ensures that they're doing better than the others is essentially that they're good at managing their work. They perform dependably. And this is one way in which you can perform dependably, by taking the most difficult task head on first. Once that's done, you're done with it, it becomes easy. So eating the frog is one technique that I'd highly recommend that all of you all do. The second thing that all of us do, I've been an enemy to this problem as well, is don't make perfect the enemy of good. This was told by, Voltaire. He's a French philosopher. But more importantly, this is still very, very valuable. When you're doing a project for campus, for example, often, very often, we spend our time looking for perfection. We think, okay, we're not going to submit this in time till I've got that X or I've completed that Y. And what happens eventually is we're left scrambling for time, and then we submit something or we give something that is not, 50% of what we would anticipate. And a lot of others, for example, may have, you know, good projects, not necessarily the best project out there, but they're still able to do well. And this becomes very important when you're doing multiple things, juggling too many different things. It's important to know that this one tool or one technique will take you a long way in your career. If something is good, you know, and good enough to be submitted, go ahead and submit it. Don't wait for perfection, because often perfection can link to delay, right? I mean, this is something I can tell you from my own practical experience. And if any of you have experience, for example, uh, and can go back and look back, as Seneca mentioned, you'll also identify times that in your student life, for example, where you were striving for perfection, but last minute had to eventually just give and submit something subpar, right? So let that not happen. Focus on being good, and that's in most cases, good enough. Don't look for perfection, because eventually it doesn't take you too far if you can't do it consistently. So perfection is fine, but you got to be consistent all the time. Now, this is another technique I want to tell you all. Now, from a time management perspective, this is extremely important. There's something called the Einstein window. Now, the Einstein window essentially is knowing your most productive time. Now, I may be most productive between, let's say, 7 to 9 o'clock in the morning, right? Let's say one of you out there may be more productive between 11 to 1 in the afternoon. Somebody may be most productive between 3 to 6 in the afternoon. Somebody could be most productive at, let's say, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. in the night. To each their own. There is no hard and fast rule that only waking up early in the morning is going to be helpful, and somebody studying in the evening or spending time in the evening, it doesn't work that way. All of us have our own time zones in which we perform the best. It's important for you to reflect and know that by now, right? Once you know your Einstein window, protect it. Now, what do you do to what I mean by protecting it is this time, don't give it to anybody else. Save it for doing the most difficult work, right? Save it for doing the work that is going to be the most mentally taxing because your brain is working at its peak at this point in time. If you protect your Einstein window, you're very, very likely to get the outcomes you want. Now, what happens typically in our Einstein window? We're either not spending our time doing what we can do best, or we are interrupted. Somebody else is asking for help, and we're giving it off there. It's important that this particular time zone you spend only on doing what will help you kind of take the day further, right? For the most important work. So that's another rule that I'd like to share with you. The next piece I have, all right, is something that's called as the law of forced efficiency. Basically, what this means is doing things, and I spoke about this, even Seneca spoke about this, like he spoke about being busy. Again, we're going back and saying that doing things is not the same as getting things done, right? When you're doing things, right, you are essentially just busy, but when you're getting things done, you're focusing on closure. That's when you are actually being productive. Now, how do you use this law in your daily work life or your student life, for example? Of all the activities you've got to do, the activities in Q1, find the highest value activity. Now, what I mean by highest value activity, let's assume it's a group activity and there are 5 people in your group who are working on that activity. Find the one that you can contribute to individually, right? And this is an activity that you think somebody else in the team cannot do as well as you can do, right? That's what you focus your time on. Everything else in a team can either be outsourced. So for an organization, for example, it's about identifying what is it that the organization should do and what is it the organization can outsource, right? Similarly, for as an individual, what is it that I want to do and what is it that I want to delegate? Maybe if I'm a team leader and I'm managing a project, there are certain things that I believe I will be able to do best, and there are certain things I would like my team to do. Find that. Once you know that, it will have a very significant impact on how you manage your time. What happens in most cases is you essentially give pieces that you can do better to people who are not best suited to do them, eventually wasting more time where somebody else could have done a better job than you in doing it, or may have better resources to close that job, right? Let's assume that there is a marketing initiative I am working on and it requires me to design a brochure. Now, I am not a designer, right? But I have a team member who is an expert, let's say, in Photoshop and has really good skills with design. Is my time more worthwhile in doing that activity, or is it better that I give this activity off to the designer? By logic, you will tell that it's probably more important the designer focuses in it while I focus perhaps on the execution of the activity. So that's how you identify where can you add the most value and use the law of forced efficiency in doing what will have the most impact. All right, this is another law that essentially helps thinking through and planning your day better. Very, very important point. This is something I struggled with in my career till probably about my first 6 years of my career, 5 or 6 years. I could never say no to people, right? So when people would come into the workplace and say, Gaurav, can you do this? I would say, yes, fine, I'll do it. Now, why was I doing it? Because I thought that these guys are senior to me in the workplace or they're my colleagues. I have to maintain good relations. If I say no, I'm likely to lose a relationship. That's now how it works. So, it's a story back in the day. I had a friend of mine, and this friend of mine, her father essentially was a coach, and he used to coach bankers, top bankers, and industrialists and others. And he was someone I met through this friend of mine. So we were having a conversation, and I told him, "Uncle, I'm struggling, with something like this." And he said, "Gaurav, there are going to be 3 problems if you can't say no. Problem number one, if you can't say no, you're more likely to lose your relationships than actually have them. Because what you're going to be doing is, because you can't say no, you'll end up chewing more than what you can eat. So you'll end up doing perhaps average or subpar work sometimes because you can't give it you can't fulfill it completely. And that means that you're losing your reputation in the long run. So don't do it." The second thing he told me is say no, because if you say yes to everything and you stress yourself out, you're going to live a shorter life. You want to have a longer life, you want to have a healthier life, you don't want to die of a heart attack and stress and burnout, then essentially say no if you cannot do something. That was the second rule he told me. I'm telling it to you much earlier. Hopefully, it'll make your lives easier. The third thing he told me is it's not that difficult to say no. All you've got to do is be as communicate your availability. You may be saying no in the interim, but you can tell them that I can't do it today. But if you give me 5 days more of time, I may be able to do it. Or if you give me a week more or 2 weeks more, I may be able to do it. Now, what that leads to essentially is people understanding that you don't have bandwidth, and this can happen at your family. Sometimes your families may push you for doing something you're not interested in, you have an assignment to do. Sometimes your friends may push you in to watch a movie, for example, and you're not in that mood to watch a movie, but you're going for it because you feel okay, I might lose out on my friend circle. Sometimes it could be you know people you're dating or essentially in relationships with who want you to do something but you're not available. Saying no is the best way out, and it's the most honest way to be truthful to yourself. Only when you're truthful to yourself can you be truthful to everybody else around you. So that's one thing I'm going to tell you. Time management is the essence of knowing what to do and what to leave, right? And saying no to what you do not want to do is essential if you really want to manage your time in a very fruitful manner. Now, if you all remember this character, it came up in just a minute. Just a minute. This particular character is a white rabbit. We saw it in Alice in Wonderland, and the character starts off by running, looking at a clock and saying, I'm late," and then he ends up by saying, I'm late," right? And that's how most of us are in our lives. We're all constantly looking at the clock and running around, trying to do things that we have to do, right? And so Lewis Carroll kind of figured out, probably he was looking at somebody uh, with that characteristic, but this is not different from many of us, right? We're all constantly battling and juggling. So what's most important, and this is a slide I'm focusing on, when you have very quick turnaround time, your 24-hour deadline, right? There's a concept of extreme productivity day, right? If something is urgent and important and has 24 or 48 hours to close, what I'd recommend is you take a day out and you call it an EPD, extreme productivity day. What does this concept mean? You will on this day tell your family, your co-workers, your friends, your clients, if you're working, I am unavailable because I have to spend my time only doing this task, right? Now, what does this do? The minute you tell your family, co-workers, clients, your boss, for example, or whoever else, I'm unavailable because I'm closing this task and I will not make myself available, you are giving yourself a timeline that I have to close this within X number of hours. So you're putting a positive pressure on yourself, right? Now, once you do that, then you identify milestones. Like, okay, this is going to be a milestone. And again, here you can use Seneca's technique of rewarding yourself for short wins, taking short milestones and working milestone to milestone. And once you're done doing that, ensure the deadlines you've set for yourself, you're keeping up to it. Because this activity does not make sense if you move from one APD for 24 hours to 48 hours to 36 hours. This is a 24-hour productivity day where you set yourself a certain time. If it's a group project and you have, let's say, 2 days to give it, but you want to close it a day ahead of time, take one day out, inform people you don't do anything else, and then just divide the task, divide and conquer, and then don't do anything else. And tell everybody else that this is my timeline, I'm going to close it within that timeline. That will also ensure that you are committing the deadlines that you have set for yourself. Right. So that's the EPD method, essentially, when you're working on something that's critical. The last technique I'll talk about, I won't spend, this is by far, again, another technique that follows the EPD technique. You can add it to it. It's called the Pomodoro Technique. Pomodoro in Italian means tomatoes, right? And essentially what it means is when you're taking a one piece, only focus on one task. Like, we believe that we can multitask, but when you're doing urgent, important situations, the only way you can close them is by focusing on one thing at a time or one task at a time. So you take a task and set a timer for 25 minutes, right? Work on that task till the timer beeps. Take a short break of 3 to 5 minutes and then repeat that process. And then after every 4 sessions, take a longer break of, let's say, 10 or 15 minutes so that, you can also freshen your brain and then come back and start the task again. What this does is, because you're working on a timer, you're working against the clock, it helps you in accomplishing a lot more, right? You are focused, the timer is helping you think through it. So these techniques, essentially, you may remember one of them, you may remember many of them, but try doing them, right? The essence is in the doing, not essentially in the reading. So time management is all about application, right? And Pomodoro technique is something I have tried in the past. It's worked well for me. Now, there are certain tools. I'll talk about the tools I use professionally, right? And where I have seen value, right? Google Calendar, just one second, please. Google Calendar essentially is the tool you can use to prioritize your day. So put all your urgent and important tasks first, put your, urgent task but not important next, and then in that priority, essentially, uh, important but not urgent, and then essentially not important, not urgent. If you calendarize your tasks, if you look at your day, Google Calendar allows you to plan everything by the hour, by every half an hour, and you can plan it. You can even plan your breaks in it. So at my workplace, how I manage my time is by using the calendar to the best effect possible. Every half an hour, every hour, I have blocked something. Even my breaks, for example, my lunch hours are on my calendar. What that does is it eventually ensures that everybody else is also aware of my time, and I am also aware of my time. And if I know something is important and urgent, I'm spending that time doing that at that hour. So it forces me to go back and look at certain things at certain points in time. It's a very easy way to kind of prioritize your calendar. So Google Calendar is the easiest thing, or any other calendar to that matter. But Google, if you're using Gmail, for example, then you have the calendar feature. You can try using it. The next thing is something called as focused work. It's an app. All right. So if you're focusing on work, then you need to know what is your distraction. All right. It could be Twitter, it could be Facebook, it could be Insta, it could be Reddit, it could be Snapchat or whatever else. There's an app called as Rescue Time. What Rescue Time does is identifies where are you most likely to spend your time, and then essentially helps you in managing that time better. So the not important, not urgent tasks get out of the way, giving you more time for important urgent tasks. Now, should all of you subscribe to Rescue Time, or am I endorsing that tool? Not necessarily. I personally use Google Calendar. I have used Rescue Time in the past, but to each their own. I'm just sharing these tools with you. You're free to go out and look at them. If you feel that you're facing a challenge with unproductive activities, then Rescue Time can clearly work. If you want to use the Pomodoro technique, use Focus Keeper. Focus Keeper essentially is a tool that is designed on the Pomodoro technique. You can take work for 25 minutes, take short breaks, get activities done. So it's essentially a tool that helps you keep focused on the task that you have to complete and identify the short milestones for it. So there are different apps for it. Do you need apps to essentially manage your time well? Not necessarily. I have known people who can work it on their diaries, for example. So writing down what you have to do, starting your day by prioritizing what you have to do, putting it on a calendar and doing it is also good enough, as long as you have something that pushes you to doing what you want, right? And if these apps are things that help you doing the same thing better, by all means, go for it. Now, I'll summarize. We've discussed a lot. Minutes, I'll summarize what we've learned, and then essentially, I'll open the floor to questions. First point in my summary for you all, as far as time management is concerned, is recognize you have limited time. Value your time, right? Your time is critical, right? Your time is limited. Make use of it. You never know when you fall short of it. So do what you have to. Prioritize both your personal time, your professional time, right? Time with friends, time with family, so on and so forth. The second thing is prioritize your tasks. Use the 2 by 2 matrix. So in the 2 by 2 matrix, we spoke about urgent and not important, important and not urgent, and not important, not urgent. Put your tasks in that 4 by 4 grid. See which tasks have to be given highest priority, which is basically urgent and important, and then work on that. How do you prioritize the urgent and important tasks now? Eat the frog. Do the most difficult task first, right? When you're working on these tasks, don't make perfect the enemy of good. If something is good and you've got limited time, let the good move ahead with that, move to the next phase. Don't get stuck, right? Beautification will take you too far, but if you don't complete the project, it has no relevance. So that's what is point number four. Point number five, use the law of forced efficiency where you will spend your time and what you will delegate. Basically, identify what you are going to be good at and what is somebody else going to be better at. And then let that job be taken up by that person. That's option number five. Option number six, as I told you, learn how to say no. Saying no will save your relationships, will ensure that you do a better job every time you're onto something. And to say no, communicate your availability. All right, you may say no something at that moment, is not saying no for life. Maybe you want to do it later. Let people know when you're available. Number seven, if you are a procrastinator, if you're somebody who likes to leave things to the last minute, then Pomodoro's technique can help. You can take 25 minutes and do things at a stretch and measure your time. So it'll help you be more focused. You can use the Pomodoro's techniques. And I've spoken about a few tools, that we just saw. Google Calendar, for example, is a great tool for you to essentially plan your day ahead of time. And that in nutshell, my friends, is the summary of what I wanted to talk to you about. Manage your time well. Eventually, it is limited. And my last slide out here for you all is my message for you all is, if you want to be productive, be a master of your minutes, right? I had taken 45 minutes for this talk. I've wrapped it up in roughly about 43 minutes. We've got another 17 minutes to kind of address any questions and answers that you guys have. So I'll be more than open to taking that up. Thank you. Thanks for hearing me out.
Well, student, now you can ask your questions. Any queries and the doubts you have got, please share with our guest, Mr. Gaurav.
And I just put my camera on. I hope you guys can see me once
No,
that's on.
we can't see your camera.
Can you see me
Uh,
now? It
no,
wasn't allowing
actually.
me to share the camera when I was essentially presenting. It's
Yeah,
only one
no,
of
no,
the two.
I can see. Yeah.
Perfect.
Please, student, please speak and share your this thing. Whatever the query you got, please share with our guest.
Is
All
anyone
right.
facing any
Uh,
challenges with managing time currently for their
no,
projects,
I,
for their
I I will
classwork?
ask you a question because I want to know. See, nowadays we have seen that the youngsters, okay, they spend a lot of time in watching their WhatsApp and all these things. But you give them a task, they say that we don't have a time. They are saying no to us. Do you think that it is a good to have this type of an say that what do you say that habits among these youngsters?
Very valid question, sir. I think it's not uncommon. If I go back 20, 25 years, perhaps as students, some of us may have not prioritized our time equally at that point in time, but it doesn't, the minute you're outside your college or institution and you have inculcated the wrong habits, it hits you very hard when you're at your workplace. And at the workplace, the people you'll identify that it's, even however collaborative the workspace is, growth in the careers is limited to those who perform well, right? And performance becomes an important indicator. So, you know it's okay to spend your time on WhatsApp, it's okay to spend your time on Netflix, for example, but it's more important to prioritize your academics, or if you're doing an internship, if you're doing work, then prioritizing that, knowing what is important for that day is critical to how successful you will be. I'll give you simple examples here, sir. I get a lot of CVs, I interview a lot of students. Sometimes I've also had the chance to look at as a startup, sometimes they're also fresh graduates who are joining my organization, fresh MBA students. And one of the things we look at is what have they done on their CV in while they were studying. And it is very clear to us that students who end up doing, let's say, a research paper, or spending time, for example, on an extracurricular activity, or spending time or doing something notable, even on the not for profit side, or things that they're passionate about, end up doing much better on the interview processes than somebody who has loitered their time. So I would highly recommend students that, from my perspective, and it's only advice, at the end of the day, it's up to you guys to implement it. Be honest to why you are at the institution, right? These are 2 years, they'll pass by very quickly. You won't have this time coming again. If you've taken this time to study and you've taken this time to get practical skills or gain, academic skills in management, as well as get some practical skills through internships or any other projects that your college organizes for you or university organizes for you, spend your time towards it, right? Use this time wisely. It's not going to come back, and it's easier said than done. I would like to go back to my time at INSEAD, for example. I'd like to go back and correct a few things. I can't go back and do it again, right? It's gone. So I hope I've been able to address your question, sir. But I think prioritizing your time is critical, and using the 2 by 2 technique will help students in kind of getting there.
So thank you very much. Any student want to ask questions, please? Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Manviri,
I
you
want to
want?
ask.
Yeah, yeah. Share your
Yeah.
thoughts.
So as we see that in future we all be working in a 9 to 5 job, and the people working now in a company, they complain that they don't have their social life. All of their time is on work. They get home by 9 or 10 p.m. They just sleep and they don't have a social life interaction with friends and family. That's not there. So how can we uh, prioritize our social life so that there should be a sense of interaction that okay, we are interacting with friends.
Very valid question. I think the pandemic has made it worse, to be honest, for a lot of people. So, to start off on that note, I will say that the pandemic has made things more difficult for people to prioritize things. But identifying what time is limited to your work and what time, your weekends, for example, or Friday evenings or Saturday evenings can be for friends, Sundays can be for friends and family. So identifying time slots and living by them is extremely important. I'll give you an example. I have a relative who is the MD of a leading investment bank. All right, now this person makes time. She's a lady. All right, but she makes time for doing her 10-kilometer run every day. She makes time for taking her children for tennis classes. She makes time to fulfilling her work responsibilities, and she also takes time for going out with friends on weekends. And when you have a long weekend coming up, more often than not, I have seen this lady taking time out with her friends, not only with her family, but she's out on these girl trips with her friend, with a bunch of friends that she's got, right? Her husband also is a CIO at a very large firm, and I've seen him also have a very similar calendar. Now, both of them, all right, I'm talking about here, are at positions of authority. One is a managing director, the other is a global CIO. These are people I look up to. And when I look at what really differentiates them from many others, is that they have found a balance in their time. When they are working, they are fully dedicated towards their work, right? But they are able to find those time slots in their jobs when they can come back and pick up their kids, for example, if it's possible. Like this lady spoke to her company that I'm available, but I will take an hour's break, for example. Her company agreed to it, and they gave her time to do that, right? Or they take breaks when they need to. They identify these breaks when they can be with their friends. Everything is possible. We just have to have the will to prioritize, right? It's very easy to go back and say I'm not able to find the time. And I'm not saying that those who say that are coming in, because are coming in from a point they're not able to prioritize. But more often than not, it is a prioritization issue, right? There are workplaces today, for example, where people are burning out, right? But when employees realize that they are burning out, they also move out of those workplaces to find something where they can find that balance. So, to each their own. It's important what you want to do in your lives, and if prioritizing. Uh, and I would highly recommend that you find a strong mental balance at your workplace. Find time to doing things you love, because that's also going to keep you motivated at the workplace. Meeting people you like, meeting your friends. By all means, take some time to do it. Plan it in your calendars. Do it on the weekends. Do it on days you're light at work. Reach out to your friends. Put it, calendarizing things is one way of going about it. I found it very useful. Identifying long weekends ahead of time where you can go and catch up with your friends, putting it in your calendar, reaching out to them will help you kind of strike that balance. Sundays, keep it completely pens down. Don't work on anything other than taking time with family. That's another way to kind of de-stress yourself and finding that time. So these are some insights I can share. These are things I've implemented, by the way. So I'm coming in, or I've seen people implement. So I'm coming in from a very practical viewpoint here. This is not theoretical at all. Manbir, I hope I was helpful.
Yes, sir. Right. Thank you so much.
Anybody
Thank
who want to ask further, please? If you got anything you want to ask in the time management, or you want to share your thoughts with our guest, okay, fine. Manbir, you can proceed now
Right. Thank you
because
so
you got a
much, sir,
class is
for
there, then you got to
enlightening.
join. So therefore, you proceed. Uh,
Yes, yes, sir. So thank you so much, sir, for enlightening us. And now I request Professor Ramnaran, sir, to take charge.
thank you.
Mr. Gaurav, I would like to thank you from the management point of view, from our management side, as well as from the student. It was a very interactive session and it was a very interesting session. And since the students are quite young, you know that they are the new MBA student, they have just joined. So there is they are not able to interact with you, but we really enjoyed it as a faculty members. 2 3 people have joined. We enjoyed your this talk with you is a very interesting. So we hope that we will have a good relations in near future, and you will be coming and discussing on say various issues related to the management. Being you are a very young person, to say that experienced person in the corporates. So with that, I would like to thank and wish you a belated happy new year to you. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot, everyone. I wish all of you all a very happy new year. And I hope that you all are very successful at the institution and beyond. With that note, I'll take a break. The presentation will be shared with you all. And if, on LinkedIn, you guys can find me up. So if you have any questions, you want to reach out, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to address any questions, even one on one, if you reach out to me. Thank you and best of luck for your future endeavors. Thank you.
Fine. Thanks a lot.